Hello and welcome to an Infinity the Game event recap. Today we're playing two games with Toha. These were played at a local event here in Canberra, and for this video we're going to do something slightly different because both of the games that we're about to see were short. They were ended decisively in favor of one player, and so what we're going to do is post-mortem them a little bit. We're going to break down some of the possible causes for the defeat, and in particular what the player who lost in each case might have done to improve their situation, either in an executional sense or in terms of changing their list construction. First, though, let's look at the list that I played. So this is a relatively straightforward modernization of really just my Toha list, the list that I took to CanCon, the list that I quite like. What we're changing here is that, a few things have changed around the list. In particular, one of them is that O12 Prestige has become a thing, and O12 Prestige changes how you want to spend your command tokens. Even a faction like Hack Islam wants slightly fewer irregular troops because you no longer have the option, or you still have the option of converting irregular orders to regular, but it's often an inferior option to just generating an order out of thin air. So there's more of a focus than usual on having irregular troops that will spend their own irregular orders and are not like pseudo cheerleaders. And just, the list, but otherwise, the season has a lot of the same fundamental drivers. There are fewer kind of weird things compared to the previous seasons, but that's the big change. The big change is that you're looking at a slightly different irregular budget because of O12 Prestige, if your list can take advantage of it. If you hold to tactical awareness, it can't, but Toha are well placed to because their tactical awareness models are garbage. So what we have here really is some pretty standard stuff. We have a Sook Wheel with K1 Sniper. The missile launcher is a very good upgrade if you can afford it, but I consistently can't, and the K1 Sniper is fine for much cheaper. We have a Kael'thas chain of command. There's a regular Kael'thas for us to give us 3 symbio mates and 1 symbio bomb, 3 McCalls, another Sook Whale, this time with heavy machine gun, 2 tack wheels. One of them is chain of command, the other one is my lieutenant with +1 order. I think with an O12 Prestige in play, there is more of an argument for the +1 command token, but because this list is running relatively light on irregulars, it is better, I think, if you're running it unlinked like I do, to run the +1 order version still, because you should have ample tokens for O12 Prestige. We have 3 McCalls, a Nickel, a Delegate, a Libertos, and then 2 Chaxa auxiliaries. These are the main changes from the previous version of this list. Without O12 Prestige, I'd probably be running a Biker in place of one of these, a Motorized Bounty Hunter, playing the point down. But in this particular case, because I want more regulars and fewer irregulars, Chaxas are still excellent. So we come in quite nicely at 6 XWC and 300 points, with a very independent second group and a very link-focused first group with 3 primary offensive elements in those 3 triads. So, in the first scenario, we're playing against Ryan, who travelled down from Sydney, and he'll be playing Cosmoflot. Let's look at his list. So on screen now is Ryan's Cosmoflot list, and there's something that's worth noting about this list is it is extremely light on long-range weapons, but Ryan had a reason for that. I'd publicized in advance that we were likely to have at least one corridor table in this in the event lineup today, and on top of that, Ryan is considering CanCon, which will be coming up in January. It's not too far away now, and at CanCon there will be multiple armory missions, and armory missions will often result in tables, obviously, which have an armory in the center of the table, which is a big blocks line of sight, etc. They're typically played C into or out of, but not through, rather than having clear shots through the doors. And it can be pretty common for armory tables to be a little more closed in than usual because you're brawling around this big, ultimate, like unlimited height scenario piece in the middle of the table. So there'll always be some kind of line of sight blocking. You can play a little bit shorter range. And so Ryan, because the CanCon lists they all kind of have a similar sort of style going on, Ryan has chosen to build 2 lists, one for more open tables and one for more closed tables, which is totally valid. And as it would happen in this case, we ended up playing on a table, which you'll see shortly, where the shorter range firepower and all of this like close assault murder stuff would be more valuable. So we have a 5-man link, Unknown Ranger being really the only gun in the entire list, with Astranic Doctor, 2 patches. I do like the decision here to have different weapon loadouts on the patcher. That's very versatile. The price difference to get the +1 verse shotgun is not that high, and having just one of those, I think it's a superior performer, but it's expensive at the cost. So the decision to have one of each gives you a lot of flexibility. Then a Varangian to form the link around. Polaris team, so this is the regular bear. Wolfgang Amadeus leading up a team of him, the Evo Hacker War Driver, and the Rokot Lieutenant. Otherwise, we have Para Commando. I think is a fine choice. The exclusion zones that are going to be present in most of the CanCon missions are not actually necessarily that deleterious to parachutists because of the rules around parachutists in the current ITS season. I think it's a fine choice. Raveneye, Usha McNeil. Again, if you're playing in exclusion zones, Usha is totally fine because she's such a good infiltrator. Den McConnelly, who is just 12 points of value, and a Tractor Mule to round everything out. So broadly, this is not a list I would play if I wasn't playing a tactic like Ryan is with the lists, where there's this decision to have one list for closed tables and one list for open tables. But in the context of that decision, I think this is a pretty cool, pretty interesting list and a different way to play. Therefore, I like it. Having spoken about that, we're playing B-Pong for this scenario. Let's look at the table. So here's our table for this game. Again, we're playing B-Pong, and you can see it's not quite a corridor table, but it's close. These areas here are interior areas, big long corridors, and although we're playing them as like these are interior spaces, they're very accessible. So the windows are muddy windows, which is to say that if you're touching them, you can see and be seen by other models. So there's a lot of visibility. You just have to touch up against the window and you can be seen by sort of anything around. And they're also what we'd call X-commable windows, which is to say that you can move through them. So there's actually a great deal of capacity to just move in a straight line, sort of like all the way up here if you are so inclined. You are not slowed down, it's just that there are gaps in line of sight as you contact the windows, otherwise you're closed down. So there can be, like this space can be a very closed in space until you start breaking through up against the windows, at which point there are quite wide fields of fire. But there are also some sniper lanes, so we have a long sniper lane all the way up to, sort of crosses the table here. And then there's also some potential sniper lanes sort of like here, which I've taken advantage of with my Nicole. So in this case, we both rolled. He's got whip 13 lieutenant, I have a whip 14 lieutenant. I have won the roll and I've picked deployment. And Ryan has made the big man play and he has elected to go second. So Ryan is deploying first, going second on a table side of my choosing, which is risky, but there is an argument that B-Pong is a very go second scenario. All of the scoring happens at the end of the round, not just the end of the game, and there's a fair bit to do in terms of the scenario. So I get the choice, but my position on this is moderated over the years, but I do still kind of think that if you are deploying first on a table side that your opponent chose for you, the decision to go second has to be very carefully considered. And it's still kind of, you better be pretty sure that you're at least as good as your opponent or better to make that kind of play, because it is hard. So Ryan has done the correct thing in this situation, where knowing that he is just hard going second, he's pretty much thoroughly null deployed, and that is generally the right play in that circumstance, because your opponent will be able to deploy all of their guns in full visibility of where any of your hard arrows are, which makes engaging your hard arrows efficiently very easy. If you're deploying second, going second, you can put your hard arrows in positions where they can cover bits of the table that your opponent will have to move to dislodge them or wants to move through. You can make that inefficient. But in this case, I mean, Ryan doesn't even particularly have any hard arrows, but he's chosen a full null deployment, and that is the right call. So what we have is inside this interior area here, we have Bearpode and Den McConnelly. There's also a Raveneye officer. Raveneye was his reserve, but he quickly realized that there wasn't going to be much he could do with it. And there is an EM mine here guarding sort of like this corridor space. One of the things I really like about this table, by the way, is that there are lots of interior spaces, which mean, and these are interior spaces closed off by doors. We're playing these as Star Trek doors, which is to say they open automatically for you to pass through, but they're closed otherwise. What that means is that there's a lot of places you can put miniatures on this table that are immune to guided missiles initially. That's kind of relevant. People should use that more for their terrain. It's just something to bear in mind. Star Trek doors make it quite easy to have those spaces you can deploy in, move into, or out of. If you're having issues with guided missiles, consider incorporating some of these things in your tables, just a couple, to add some safe zones. Anyway, the bulk of the rest of Ryan's army is sort of scattered over here, where we have the big core link, as I mentioned, and then Wolfgang and his friends over here. Now, one of the things I did at the very beginning of the game is I asked what was RIP 13 on the table, what were eligible lieutenant models, and I quickly determined that the Rokot hanging out behind these trees, this is an aggressive position for your only lieutenant, was the only lieutenant. I actually don't know Cosmoflot that well, but I was relatively certain that there wasn't anything on the table that could be, like I didn't see anything that was a Zenit, so I didn't think there was anything coming that could be chain of command, so I did mark this model for destruction. Otherwise we have Usha hanging out here. She's in a reasonably good position. If Ryan had been going first, I imagine he would have over-infiltrated her, but as he wasn't going first, really just chucking her into the teeth of my models with sensors would have been a bad call. So for my part, I've got my nickel on the corner of the table here. It's in a position basically where it can see that line and then down here. So it's doing two things there. First thing is it's blocking off this entire table edge from paracommandos. It's very good at killing paracommandos if they walk on. So that makes me sort of like very comfortable around this entire space. But then secondly, it's pinning down the Bear and then McConnelly. If they want to just jump out of this window, they'd have to contend with a viral sniper, which obviously they don't want to do. Otherwise, I'm set up for, we've got my K1 sniper here, just with friends hanging around. We have one of the main Harry Slink is over here. This is the one with the HMG, the McCall, and the tack wheel officer. We have my tack wheel lieutenant over here, Libertos mine, Libertos, and then there's the diplomatic delegate is over here. She's got a very specific job to do. And then we've got the other Harry's team over here. That's two McCalls in this case, and the Sakiel. So I'm going first, and in B-Pong, if you're going first, you need to really balance your offense with the scenario because there are some things that you have to accomplish. What I don't really like to do in B-Pong going first is I don't like to push the beacon forward and then try and control it. Because not only is doing that very order intensive, but it really just exposes you to lose a specialist for nothing. So what we're going to do in this scenario is that right off the bat, the diplomatic delegate's just going to run forward, she's going to stay inside the building, and she's going to huck the beacon out. It's going to end up there. What you're aiming to do by this is you just push the beacon in your opponent's half of the table. Yes, that puts it closer to them. It makes it easier for them to then move a model up to it and capture it. That's fine. But as long as it's in their half of the table, you're getting that once per round tick of points, and you can earn more points later. The other thing you'll always want to do on the first turn is get at least one model onto a console and start scoring points that way, so you're getting 2 points per turn and you're staying in the game. That should be done in a relatively order efficient way, which means that the rest of the turn you want to spend stepping on your opponent's neck, and in this case we're going to do that. So a lot of our orders this turn are going to be spent on the little assault team of the Sakiel Viral Combi, who has a Symbio Bomb, and the two McCalls. And they are basically just going to run up here, run around here. The McCalls are going to come around, and I am going to get into combat with the Rokot Lieutenant, get into combat with the Evo Driver, and eliminate both of them. This doesn't go totally perfectly. I would like to get some flamethrowers down, but Ryan is relatively good at triaging the entire situation. I'm going to lose one of the McCalls. The other is going to end up in melee with Wolfgang Wolf, who's just going to jump into CC. And I'm also going to lose a face-to-face roll between the Combi Rifle Sakiel, so Viral Combi Sakiel, and just the Rokot Lieutenant firing her SMG, that I was really hoping I would just get the kill that way, instead I had to go into melee with the McCall. So they're going to end up with the Sakiel hanging out here, the McCall in CC with Wolf, and me just being like, okay, I have to do more scenario stuff now, that's fine. But that's going to put Ryan in loss of Lieutenant, which will limit how much he can do on his first turn. So otherwise we go about securing scenario presence, and one of the things that I really like about this turn is that the tack wheel lieutenant, who's hanging out down here somewhere, just runs all the way up through here, hops over the objective into this room, and then sits in this room in base contact with the objective. You want to identify, if you can, a safe place to touch an objective, and then just nestle something there. And if it's something like a hacker, or something that can exact zone of control arrows, all the better. In this case, I'm using my tack wheel, and with the remaining orders in the turn, I will move the other link forward, and I'll do basically the same thing. So they'll end up with the McCall over here, the Sukoil HMG watching kind of like this space there, and then the tack wheel in base contact with the objective, prone, hanging out. So we're doing fine. Better because I've done my classified, which was Predator, so I've killed 2 models in CC. And although I've only at this point killed 2 of Ryan's models, like that's not a tremendous first turn, I have put him in loss of lieutenant, and because I put him in loss of lieutenant, I have a breather now that he has to spend a lot of resources to try and step on the gas to counterattack me, and he's going to struggle to do that. And he's going to struggle even more to do that because of what happens in his turn, which is where our postmortem begins. So this link team activates, they got tactical awareness on the Unknown Ranger. The Unknown Ranger is going to come out here and just utterly euthanize the Sakiel that is standing here. Wolfgang Wolf then spends his irregular order having a face-to-face roll with the McCall. McCall actually wins the face-to-face roll, only does one wound to Wolf. That's fine, not the end of the world. At this point, Ryan makes the mistake of being like, okay, the McCall and Wolf is actually relatively likely to win that because of his para CCW. I'm just going to ignore that. I've got scenario stuff to do. I'm going to spend my command tokens pushing the link forward. So this link moves all the way up and around and occupies basically, so we've got Wolf here, the McCall in CC here, and then the link begins to occupy basically this space like this, and the McCall dodges. and the McCall dodges to stand there, and you can basically see where this is going. Ryan is left with basically no choice. Wolf activates, walks the remaining millimeter into CC, and the flamethrower hits everything. And the flamethrower, as it happens, Wolf survives. The patches each only take 1 wound because they're immune to continuous damage, but the Varangian, the Unknown Ranger, and the Strannik all burn to death. And that is pretty much a catastrophic end to this turn, and we kind of just call it there. That's basically the game, because I can just bounce Ryan down the road for the rest of the game, staying on the objective, staying on the beacons, killing everything that he has. The only other thing that happens is that Usha ran out, fired her pistols, and killed the McCall and wounded. Damage 13. I rolled a 1 to save. She wounded the Suquel through the symbiomate, but it's not enough. She died to the flamethrower. Like she's dead as well now. It's just too many casualties. Even though I've lost a fair bit, it's too many casualties. So, what can we take away? What is the postmortem here? How could Ryan have done things differently? So the first is he could have just gone first. He's got a really good link team for attacking into Toha. Now, like, yes, he's got one model with structure. Den McConnelly, I believe, has structure. But if you look at the makeup of that link team, the core link, patches are really good at just going straight through Toha Ferroware defenses. Because endgame, it does a wound. Cool, just yeet the patches through until they're in close range and then blow everything up. That because they are resistant to McCall arrows, the flamethrowers, and they're tough, they can just go in after things like the tack wheel officers and make a mess. So that is something that he should seriously have considered. It's like I know that's like, oh, it's just a scenario, as a go second scenario, just hard go second. But like there are some people that you probably shouldn't hard go second against, and I am probably one of them. I mean, I'm a little rusty, haven't played a ton of Infinity recently, but it's just one of those, like, if you're not sure that you can hold off your opponent, you're really rolling the dice by making that choice. So that's one thing. Could have just gone first. The other is executional, and that really is this situation over here with the McCall. Patches in this case were a perfect option for disengaging, or at least dealing with this last remaining McCall. And so what he should have done, the first thing he did was have the Unknown Ranger move out and euthanize the Sacule. Yep, cool, that's perfect. Then have a Patcher become the link leader. You're going to have to spend command tokens for this, and just push it out through the door and pull the Unknown Ranger back. Doors close behind the Patcher. Patcher fires burst force shotgun, core link into CC with Wolfgang. Yes, there's a very good chance that you kill Wolfgang, but there's also a very good chance that you kill. You're firing on 14s at that point, I think, or 13s. There's a very good chance that you kill the McCall. And if you don't kill the McCall, then he's in the open now. What's he going to do? You're a Patcher. He can't actually kill you with his heavy flamethrower. You're going to put him down, and that solves that problem. Once that problem is solved, not only am I down then a whole Haris team, which equalizes the score, but you can run models forward, just get onto the objective, score a point that way. That's probably all that can actually be accomplished this turn, realistically, because of the command token onus. Which brings us back to our second thing of, like, just don't run lists with super obvious lieutenants unless you have a backup plan. Like, there's a time and place where if you have, like, I run Saladin, and Saladin is an obvious lieutenant, and I don't run him with chain of command. But I make him one of my reserve drops so he protects himself. He's also considerably tougher than a pleb Rockot. Just have a decoy. Don't like big brain that play. It's just too vulnerable. It's just too easy for some. I could have run forward and killed him with Ferroware. I could have like had an impersonator. I just ran a heavy flamethrower melee dude across the field. Don't run a lieutenant like that. Or if you're going to, you deploy it way back, not part of an active core link, get it the hell back there and stay. Like back here behind these crates, for example, is something that you could have done. Failing that, at least defend it with the Raven Eye Mine, which would have assisted, and maybe, I mean, the thing, maybe stalled me out or forced me to have a troop, cop that mine, and end not as part of the assault team. So 3 or 4 potential things they could have from the outcome of the game. I think the broad decision to have a close range assault list for a tournament that has some close range assault missions, and then dropping it into this kind of close range-ish table, which I really liked, by the way. I really enjoyed playing on this table. Thanks very much to Nick from Canberra for bringing it along. These are all possible options. Like the broad tactic was good, but it got badly undone by a series of choices, including eventually that fateful decision to just leave them a call behind and risk me rolling a 10 to dodge and just have that flamethrower shot from hell. So we concluded the game there, registered it as a concession. Let's move on to the next round. So in the next round, this is actually round 3. I took the bye to even numbers in round 1. As more players arrived in round 2, we ended up with 10 players at the event over the course of the day, which was really nice. A fair few new and returning players, plus a few veterans or more experienced players. A good mix generally. And as it happens, we think we had 4 undefeated players due to late arrivals, like basically byes given out in the first round, people with parenting responsibilities, etc. So we had 4 undefeated players in going into the final round. One of them was Jono, who was playing this Morat list, who had effectively, this is, we'll talk about this list. You can see it on the screen there. I'm just going to come back to it. But Jono had effectively just Raicho'd his way through 2 previous rounds. Like, literally, Raicho had gone Burt all the way across the table and just killed enough that his opponents didn't really have a rejoinder and had bounced off trying to deal with it for the rest of the game. So Jono was undefeated, and this was a little bit of what we would call an Icarus moment because he then played into me, and I am a little more experienced than Jono. Jono actually has been playing, technically speaking, for longer than I have. He's a wonderful person. I actually met him through Conquest, and reminded him that Infinity existed, and he came back. And this is his first event I think it's his first event in N4, and it's his first event playing as Morat ever. And this is kind of what he had access to, what he thought was cool, and he brought it along, and he played against me in Resilience Operations. Now, I've given a review of Resilience Operations previously. I think there are some things that you could do to streamline it, but broadly, I really like it, and this game was no exception. I quite enjoyed how this game was a mix of having to do things for the scenario and having to do things just to play Infinity and scrap and fight. But this was Jono's list. So we have a Morat core with 3 Vanguards, 1 combi rifle, 1 K1 sniper rifle, 1 missile launcher, a Dartok hacker with combi rifle and Kornak. We then have a Rodok Haris submachine gun, strategic deployment rocket, hacker Rodok, and Anyat. We have an NCO Raicho because it has the heavy flamethrower, and then a Medtech Epsilon with 2 slave drones. And that's it. That's the entire list. It's 10 troopers, but it's 13 orders. It is very much designed to Raicho go Burt or have one of the little Haris team or Rodoks move forward. And that's basically it. And if it goes first, then 13 orders through a Raicho turns to 11 orders. 11 orders through a Raicho is pretty good. It's kind of hard to stop that doing what it wants if it gets out, like if it threads the needle through hackers or it just pulls its way through. And I get it. I kind of get how it had won its first 2 games. But in this case, I crit the lieutenant role and I elected to go first. Now, in Resilience Operations, there are plenty of pieces of the scenario that are end of game scoring, but I didn't particularly want to run the risk. I know how many orders a Morat list can have. I did not want to play into Morats going first if they had potentially the huge order link teams, etc. And I also drew objectives that I wanted to go first for. So let's show those. So I've drawn these, and it's important to note, I wouldn't always pick Interrupt the Signal, which is the Destroy Enemy Beacons mission, except that I had to choose between that and Capture Enemy Beacons, and you really don't want both of those. You don't want to try and destroy and capture beacons at the same time. I really shouldn't have to tell you why, it's kind of obvious. You can do both. Beacons have got 3 structure, so you could do like 2 wounds to a beacon and still be able to run away with it. But given the tension there, I'm just going to choose one of them. And because I had long-range anti-material weapons in the form of the K1 Combi, and all my McCalls had DACCWs, I'm like, yeah, I can probably do Interrupt the Signal. Let's pick that. I feel like that's a fairly easy way to get 3 points. We otherwise had Appropriate Supplies, which is a little challenging, and Hijacking, which is a little challenging. But because I really had to discard one of the beacon missions, that's what I had. So this is one of the more challenging mission mixes that I've had for Resilience Operations so far. But it did have the advantage that a fair bit of it could be done early in the game, or progress could be made early in the game. Because with hijacking, if you can get some HVTs back early, or a HVT back early, that can kind of be points in the bag. And Interrupt the Signal can just be done on the first turn. You can score 3 points out the gate if your opponent doesn't have good places to hide the beacons. And that's basically what happens. In terms of the battlefield conditions, I drew Arctic Combat. Jono also drew Arctic Combat and then flipped it for +1 ballistic skill to models with visors, which I was quite scared about before he showed me his list undeployed, but he didn't have any MSV and I did, so it was a minor benefit to me, although the Nikul would never take a shot. So here's the table. You can't quite see them, but I've got some Chaxa here, and then there's one over here. Those are on anti-Rassiat duty, where they're just watching the places that a Rassiat might come in and really do me some grief. Otherwise, we've got the Nikul deployed here. It can see down this line there, and along this line there. But it doesn't, it's got a little bit of line of sight, but not much down into sort of these midfield areas. This is one of the saturation zones that I placed with Arctic Combat. But the nickel is too far back to really have plunging fire into that area. I placed the saturation zones outside of Jono's deployment zone, expecting to have to engage a core link, and I did, although it wasn't the core link that I expected. Otherwise, we have the Sukhwheel, HMG, Takwheel, McCall, Harry's team over here. We have another McCall, Sakiel, McCall link team over here, and then we have the K1 sniper, Kael'tar link team over here with my lieutenant on the building with them. Now the plan is I want to try and shoot a beacon on the first turn if I can, and I'm going to do that by moving the Sukhwheel K1 either up these stairs onto this building or just out either of these directions, if I can get a bead on the beacon. But in the knowledge that there might be an enemy core link team, I am prepared to slice that pie up, as it were, by placing some Ferroware mirror ball with my lieutenant if I have to. It isn't actually going to come to that, but it's an option that I wanted to have. The Libertos is going to reserve deploy here because of how Jono is going to deploy, and the diplomatic delegate is just going to hang out down here. She's not particularly useful in this matchup because it's Morats, they can't be erased. So she's just going to try and go and do some mission somewhere. For Jono's part, he kind of refused flanks, where basically his entire army deploys in this space. We have the core link team spread out around here, with the K1 sniper there and the missile there. We have the Raicho hanging out down here, and then he does the kind of slightly newbie thing where the entire Rassiad link is in a line over here, which is why the Libertos is deployed, hoping to run around and shotgun them. I'm not actually going to be able to. He will defend against that, but it's going to be a rough first turn for Jono. So the first thing that we do is we spend 2 orders, and there's a beacon hanging out up here, right on the deployment zone edge, and I do have visibility to it. Jono selected to put it on the bridge, and there was another one over here that I could also have shot, and so I just move, spend 2 orders, and I take the beacon down. Boom, boom, cool, that's 3 points in the bag, thank you kindly. We then begin moving the HMG team up and around here, up and around there, and we take the first face-to-face roll against his K1 sniper through this saturation zone, and we put it down. We actually put it all the way to dead. I'm firing 4 dice, he's firing 1, I have mimetism, he's just a Vanguard. Don't take Vanguard ARO pieces when such better elements exist. We'll cover that in our postmortem. The Sukhwheel then moves up and around to here, which gets line of sight to the missile launcher inside 24 inches. The link team is now down to 4 members, and I ace it as well, although I only put it unconscious. The Sukhwheel K1 sniper then just activates and engages the Raicho, and it takes like 4 orders, but I have 4 orders to spend. I have a Symbiomate, the Raicho is a tag, I'm a K1 sniper, blam, 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 blam. I get it unconscious when I run out of orders, and so I actually at that point spend my lieutenant orders on the lieutenant to run up to here, and I shoot it to death with my combi rifle. Would never do this if it was standing. I just wanted it dead because there's Dr. Worm hanging out down there. So it takes 2 orders, move up here, then move prone, and 6 shots with the combi kill it. Now, what I don't have is enough orders to put the Libertos into Anyat and the Link team, although I do get the Libertos all the way around there. We've sort of run out of orders trying to do that, but this is still a super successful first turn. We've killed the Raicho all the way to dead, we've killed one of the Morat core link all the way to dead and knocked the other one unconscious, and we've put a Libertos staring at the Rodok link, and we've scored 3 objective points. So that's pretty rough for Jono, and we'll go over some of how this could have changed, but kind of from here he's not really able to get back into the game. Every gun he has except for Kornak is dead. The Rodok Link team is contending with the Libertos. He makes one pretty game play, which is that the Dr. Worm will res the missile launcher, and I have kind of unavoidably left down in this position here. The Sukhwheel is hanging out within 2 inches of the Kael'tar, and so that missile could splash the Kael'tar, but the missile launcher misses the shot, it eats a whole bunch of bullets, it dies. And we play through for a couple of remaining turns. Kornak makes a sort of game attempt to come up and around through here and take some fights, and he even puts, I think he knocks the Symbiomate and does a wound to the Sukhwheel, thanks damage 15 on the Mark 12, but it's just not enough. And Jono is going to begin his second turn in retreat with me sitting on objectives and having Civivac HVTs, and that's basically the game. So end the game there. What could Jono have done differently? So a big thing, executionally speaking, is the positioning of the Raicho. The Raicho was positioned in a location where it could not guts after it began to take fire. And so as soon as it took some K1 sniper fire, you really wanted it to be in a position where it could guts out of line of fire, having absorbed some of my orders, and be ready to fight next turn. Now, yes, it's a Morat, it has to make a whip roll, it's rolling a whip 12 to succeed its guts, there's always some risk there, but at least leave the option open if you're going to deploy it in a location like that, or better yet, don't deploy it standing in the crosshairs of a K1 sniper with mimetism, a symbiote, etc. So executionally, the big thing there was that the tag really just, it needed to be in a location where it could be preserved, because it was, I mean, Jono had obviously played it really well for like 2 games before mine, where it had run an absolute just train on everything around it. But in this case, I took it all the way to dead on the first turn because I have a K1, a big K1 gun. The other thing, just as a simple executional matter, is for God's sake, don't deploy link teams sitting in a row. Just don't ever do that. There is no reason, like, never ever do that. There's no reason, particularly not if your opponent has access to like flamethrowers, templates, light shotguns. Everyone has access to light shotguns these days. For God's sake, split your link teams up, split them across levels, just so they can't all be shotgunned by the same fish. They didn't in this game, but the risk was just too high. More generally, though, I don't often say this was kind of a crap list, but this was kind of a crap list. Vanguard, like, there are so many things in Morats that are much more scary than both Rhodoks and Vanguards. And yeah, I guess it was just what Jono had, it's what he wanted to play, kind of fair enough. But if you're going to build Morats, you have access to things like Suryat heavy rocket launchers and Kaitoks and Yaogat snipers, and you can fit all of those in a list if you just cut the Vanguard infantry, you cut Dr. Worm, you have one Vanguard paramedic as part of the link. You have all of these points now to have actually good models in the link: a Yaogat sniper, a Suryat HRL, a Kaitok Feuerwerk, pick two, maybe a Kaitok with Flamen Spear so you can close assault. Keep Kornak in there, he's outstanding. Your little Haris team, if you're going to do that, you really need some Dadarazi in there. They're cheap, they're awesome. Cut the frickin' Rhodoks to get access to those. You can keep the tag. Tag is fine. I wouldn't run the NCO version, generally speaking, in a list with a Strategos Lieutenant, because it's a useless rule. But I guess if you like the Flamethrower, I don't like the Flamethrower enough. If I, like, the cost difference between the NCO Raicho and the version with the heavy rocket launcher is not massive, but if you just like, I really wanted to have a template weapon, just pay points for a Preta. Like, it's cheap. The cost difference is enough to almost accommodate a Preta that you can just run alongside, just run it up the table with the tag if you're worried about it that much, or hang it out near the tag as a defensive piece, and you can live without the flamethrower. And then you get a whole Preta. Also, probably you should have some like elements just in the list as disposable pieces, things to run through mines, etc. Gakis are so cheap that there is no excuse not to have them. Don't take the Dartok Combi Rifle, take the Dartok SMG, there's some more points, chuck some Gakis in. And on top of that, just generally, if you can, never run a single combat group. Even if you want to run a really elite list, scrape the points, find 3 points for a Warcore, 4 points for a Gaki, and just put it in Combat Group 2. Because if you do that, your opponent no longer gets to guarantee that there aren't any Rassiats coming. Now, I deployed models on anti-Rassiat duty because I didn't know it was in Jono's list until he deployed, so I had a bit of protection, but just keeping that threat there would have had an impact on how I played the game that is valuable enough to just find 4 points for a Gaki into Combat Group 2, just so that I can't play my entire first turn knowing that I'll be safe. So that's something else as well, but generally this list wants to be rejiggered. Yes, I know I am kind of saying you should just play more of a meta list, but in this particular case, you should play more of a meta list. There's lots of ways to build Morats within that general framework, but those good pieces are good for a reason. The Yaogat sniper is outstanding. The Suryat HRL is outstanding. Kaitoks are outstanding. Dadarazi are outstanding. All of the Hungaries are outstanding, whether you link them or not. You've got Kornak, that is great. You've got a Raicho, that's great. I personally think you should play a cheaper Raicho profile. Anyat is totally okay, by the way. Nothing wrong with her, but Rodok are not quite good enough when they are being bought at the expense of all of these excellent things. So, yes, I'm kind of giving a you should just play a medalist kind of example here, but any of those things would have improved the list considerably. Like, it's really difficult. A Suryat HRL is way harder for me to fight. It's ballistic skill. It's going to be 2 dice on 16s in ARO because it ignores my mimetism. In this case, it would have been 2 dice on 17s because of the battlefield conditions. That's a colossal difference if you're fighting all of this mimetism stuff that Toha have access to as the gunfighters, and it suddenly becomes very difficult to fight our way past that. Even if you just found a point for that, just an single MSV piece. Using Vanguard are very expensive and they're not very good. Like, a single Vanguard paramedic in a link is totally okay as a cheap alternative to Dr. Worm, because the Morats all have high fizz, it's very worthwhile, but that should be basically the only Vanguard that you take. Other Morat stuff is so good, don't leave it at home. So that concludes 2 games. I went undefeated over the course of the day, but one of them was a bye. The event was won by Ed Sykes playing Varuna, which he plays very well, and was broadly a very good day with 10 players. Last event that we'll have for Infinity at Jolt in the year, but I'm really glad I got to run it, and it was a very good time. As always, if you like the work that I do, if you like these videos, you can support me via the Buy Me a link, Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this. I will see you, as always, next time.